Hi students, today we have another set of 10 questions, general chemistry. We will start with the first one. The correct decreasing order of lattice energies of the following ionic compounds is. Among the option, you are given the same four compounds in all the options. They are Al2O3, CaO, NaCl and MgBr2. See, we know whenever the charges on cation and anion are intense, then the electrostatic interaction will be very high, and so the energy required to convert 1 mole of the ionic solid into its isolated ions in the gaseous state, which is called a lattice enthalpy, will be very high. So greater the electrostatic force of attraction, higher will be the lattice enthalpy. We know that. Further, lattice enthalpy will be high when the charges on the Coulombic interaction will be very high, when the charges on the cation and anion are very intense. This in turn depends upon the size as well as the number of charges on each ion. We can genuinely guess that smaller the cation with greater number of charges on it, higher will be its charge density and higher will be its electrostatic force of attraction as well as repulsion. Okay. So here, see, among the cations, Al3 plus is in the list the smallest cation, and with the 3 charges. So that will be exerting very high Coulombic, the highest Coulombic interaction here, followed by calcium, Ca2 plus, followed by magnesium is somewhat more strong actually, because magnesium is somewhat smaller, isn't it? So a magnesium is there, then calcium is there, then sodium is there. Okay. Regarding anion, oxide is the smallest here with the 2 minus charge. Chloride, if you compare chloride and bromide, bromide is very diffused, so it is least efficient. Okay, and we may genuinely conclude that aluminum oxide will have the highest Coulombic interactive force of attraction and so highest lattice enthalpy. Even though magnesium is smaller than calcium, it is not much different. Further, oxide is a very small anion compared to Br minus. For that reason, calcium oxide comes, this also we may conclude logically. Calcium oxide will be coming second. Okay, now remaining are magnesium bromide and sodium chloride. Of course, chloride is smaller than bromide, but magnesium is having 2 positive charge and very small in size compared to Na plus. For that reason, we may expect that, see, we may have a doubt between these two. We may not be that sure. Okay, so we have to, in real case, we have to depend upon some experimental value. Then only we can be 100% sure which is. And here, from experimental values, it have been proved that magnesium bromide comes the third. Then only comes sodium chloride. So our order is Al2O3 greater than COO greater than MgBr2 greater than NaCl. Okay. C answer. Smaller the size of ion and larger the number of charges on it, stronger the electrostatic force of attraction between them, and so higher the lattice enthalpy. Decision making between NaCl and MgBr2 is a bit tricky. This is because Mg2 plus has greater charge and a small size than Na plus. On the other hand, Br minus ion is more diffuse than Cl minus. In such situation, experimentally determined values must be used to decide. Okay. Now we have the next question. Statement 1. A fresh stain of iodine on a cloth is washed away using hypo. Statement 2. Hypo converts iodine to colorless iodide. What is hypo? Sodium thiosulfate. Reaction between iodine and sodium thiosulfate we have studied first year. We have studied that in first year, chapter redox reaction in iodimetry. Okay. Iodine is reduced to iodide by sodium thiosulfate, where during which Sodium thiosulfate itself get oxidized to sodium tetrathionate. So iodine become iodide, sodium thiosulfate becomes sodium tetrathionate. Both these products are colorless and water soluble. Iodine remains as a stain on your cloth, etc., where it falls, where it spills. It is having a brownish yellow, yellowish brown color stain. So if you smear upon it with a cotton wet with a hypo solution, that will be slowly removed. So both statements are true. Statement 2 justifies the statement 1. Both statements are true. Statement 2 is not an explanation for statement 1. 3. Statement 1 alone is correct. 4. Statement 2 alone is correct. We will see the explanation. I have already explained that. What is given here? See, I2 stain can be removed by washing with the hypo, which is a solution of sodium thiosulfate. It removes I2 through a chemical change during which iodine is converted to iodide. Equation 2Na2S2O3 plus I2 aqua giving 2NaI aqua plus Na2S4O6. Na2S2O3 is called sodium thiosulfate and Na2S4O6 is called sodium tetrathionate. So please remember that. And so the answer is 1. Wrongly it is given as 3 here. It is wrong. It is 1. Okay, answer is 1. That is both statements are correct and statement 2 justifies statement 1. Okay, we will proceed to the next. Okay. Statement 1. Iodine is liberated when Ki is added to a solution containing copper ions. But KCl when added to a solution containing copper ion, chlorine gas is not evolved. Statement 2. It is a strong, I minus is a strong reducing agent, whereas Cl minus is not a strong reducing agent. I will explain the situation. Suppose you are adding iodide like potassium iodide to copper sulfate solution. Iodine is liberated. We have studied that in redox reaction, first year iodimetry. There we add potassium iodide to copper sulfate solution, whereby iodide partly become iodine. Okay, iodine. That iodine is titrated and estimated using sodium thiosulfate. That is called iodimetry. So iodide become iodine. Iodide become iodine by copper ion. Copper ion can oxidize iodide to iodine. But if instead you add KCl to copper sulfate, there is no reaction. It's a fact. It's a fact. So statement 1 is correct. Statement 2, iodide is a strong reducing agent, whereas Cl minus is not a strong reducing agent. Correct. See, I minus can reduce Cu2 plus to Cu because it has Cu2 plus to Cu plus, Cu2 plus to Cu plus, because iodide is more willing to release its electron to Cu2 plus. Thereby, I minus become I and later I2, whereas Cu2 plus becomes Cu. But what about chloride? Chloride will not release its electron to Cu2 plus. Thereby, it will not become chlorine atom and then chlorine molecule, because Cl minus is stable, because chlorine is highly electronegative than iodine. So chloride will be highly stable compared to iodide. That's why iodide is willing to release its electron, whereas chloride is not willing to release its electron. So if we come back, statement 1, iodine is liberated when Ki is added to a solution containing Cu2 plus ion, but KCl when added to a solution containing Cu2 plus chlorine gas is not evolved. That statement is correct. And what is the statement 2? I minus is a strong reducing agent, whereas Cl minus is not a strong reducing agent. So both statements are correct and statement 2 justifies statement 1. So again answer will be 1. Answer 1. I minus is a strong reducing agent which can reduce Cu2 plus to Cu plus, whereas Cl minus is not a strong reducing agent because it is more stable and so cannot convert Cu2 plus to Cu plus. Look at the equation given there. 2Cu plus plus 4I minus giving Cu2I2, cuprous iodide plus I2. 2Cu2 plus 4Cl minus, there is no reaction. Hope you understood that. Okay, we proceed to the next question. Again, statement type. Statement 1. Zinc when treated with a dilute nitric acid, hydrogen gas is not evolved. Statement 2. Nitric acid is a strong oxidizing acid and reduces hydrogen evolved to water. Both statement, like we know that first statement. Why? What is the answer? We will check the next one. See, it is a fact. See, when zinc reacts with the nitric acid, dilute nitric acid, it is a fact that hydrogen is formed. Any metal can displace hydrogen from an acid as hydrogen. But nitric acid, unlike sulfuric acid and hydrochloric acid, is an oxidizing acid also. So what happened here is that the hydrogen evolved get converted to hydrogen evolved is oxidized to water. H2 become H2O, and that is the reason why we don't see the evolution of oxygen. Evolution of hydrogen. So hydrogen get oxidized to water. That's why hydrogen is not evolved. But what is statement 2 given? Statement 2 is incorrect because conversion of H2 to H2O is oxidation of hydrogen and not reduction of hydrogen. In statement 2, it is mentioned as reduction. That's why it is wrong. One may not notice that point. One may miss to notice that point and lose mark. So please be careful while we read the statements. So the second statement is wrong, and so our option of answer is 3. Only first statement is correct. Hope you understood that. Now the next question. Statement 1. Aluminium fluoride is an ionic compound, whereas BF3 is a covalent compound. Statement 2. BF3 involves back bonding. Okay. See, here both statements are correct. Aluminium fluoride is an ionic compound. BF3 is a covalent compound, correct. BF3 involves back bonding. But do the second statement justifies the first statement? No. Why? See, listen to me. Back bonding happens only when there is already a covalent bond. A secondary back bond will happen. So that does not explain why AlF3 is ionic and BF3 is covalent. It says something happening after that only. It doesn't explain. It is not an explanation. It is a continuation only. Okay. What happens next? That is not explanation. Then what should have been an explanation? This is because aluminium is more metallic and preferred to form ionic compound, whereas boron is less of a metallic character and so preferred to form covalent compound. That's the explanation. So both statements are correct, but second statement is not a proper explanation for the first statement. So our answer will be 2. Answer 2. Both statements are correct, but second statement is not a correct explanation for the first statement. AlF3 is ionic because aluminium is more metallic than boron. Okay, so that's over. Coming to the next question. Sixth question. In CS3 thrice N, nitrogen atom involves sp3 hybridization. In SiS3 thrice N, nitrogen atom involves sp2 hybridization. Third, in CS3 thrice N and SiS3 thrice N, both have d pi hyphen p pi bonding. Last, geometry of CS3 thrice N is tetrahedron. Okay. In these options, there are only mentioning of 2 compounds, that is CS3 thrice N and SiS3 thrice N. See, CS3 thrice N is as if 3 hydrogens of ammonia are replaced by methyl group. Okay. SiS3 thrice N is as if 3 hydrogens of ammonia is replaced by silane, SiH3. Okay. Silane group. Okay, silyl group. Okay. See, we know carbon is a second period element without d orbital, but silicon is a third period element with empty d orbital. So, unlike in CS3 thrice N, when it comes to SiS3 thrice N, the silicon can make use of its vacant d orbital to which nitrogen can backbond with its lone pair of electron. Nitrogen can backbond to silicon atoms vacant d orbital. But backbonding will be effective only when the molecule as a whole is planar. But planarity can be acquired or attained when the central atom is in sp2 hybridization. So, in SiS3 thrice N, unlike in CS3 thrice N, central nitrogen changes its hybridization from sp3 to sp2. Then the molecule as a whole become planar so that effective backbonding can take place. You have studied backbonding in BF3. There, attached atoms are donating electron into the central atom. Here it is the reverse. Central atom is donating electron to the attached groups. Still it is backbonding. Okay, so for backbonding to happen, nitrogen changes its hybridization from sp3 to sp2. So CS3 thrice N continues to be sp3 hybridized tetrahedral pyramidal. So we will now read the options. In CS3 thrice N, nitrogen atom involves sp3 hybridization, correct. In SiH3 thrice N, nitrogen atom involves sp2 hybridization, correct. CS3 thrice N and SiS3 thrice N both have d pi p pi bonding. No, only SiS3 thrice N can have d pi p pi bonding. Geometry of CS3 thrice N is tetrahedral. Yes, geometry means molecular electron pair geometry. Electron pair geometry is tetrahedral and molecular geometry is a pyramidal. What is the difference between electron pair geometry and molecular geometry? While we discuss molecular geometry, we consider only the groups, not lone pair. So when lone pair electron on nitrogen is ignored, it is pyramidal. If it is also included, it becomes distorted tetrahedral. So here only geometry is mentioned. So it can be either electron pair geometry or molecular geometry. Molecular geometry is also known by the name shape. Shape means molecular geometry. You don't have to consider the electron pair. So actually shape is pyramidal. Okay. So we now know that statement 3 is incorrect. 3 must be the answer. We will see what is given there. See, the structures are also given. NCF3 thrice has no possible backbonding. N is sp3 hybridized pyramidal shape. N SiS3 thrice involves backbonding where a central nitrogen atom is the donor and Si is the acceptor atom. For the smooth backbond, molecule have to be planar, and so central nitrogen atom is in sp2 hybridization. The backbonding is 2p3d type. 2p 3d pi backbonding. 2p of nitrogen and 3d of silicon. The molecule as a whole is planar. Please see, silicon make use of one of the d orbital which has 4 lobes. It is not a d square orbital, any other. Okay. So now we know the answer for that question also. We will proceed to the next. Question. Next question. The type of bonds in solid PCl5 is are covalent only, covalent and coordinate bond, covalent and ionic bond, covalent coordinate and ionic bond. See, you might be wondering, the same question has come in the first question paper also, but why then I included it here? Because I need a correction. I need a more explanation. Actually, in the book, the given answer was ionic and covalent. But upon further thinking, I found it to be wrong. Why? You know why? See, how PCl, this ionic pair is formed. Please think about it. Two PCl5 come molecules in the solid state. From one molecule to the other molecule, a Cl minus is transferred. So the sixth PCl bond is involving 2 electrons from Cl minus and no electron from the central phosphorus of PCl6 minus. Since both the electrons for bonding are taken by the same chlorine, it has to be considered as a coordinate bond. So in PCl6 minus, only 5 bonds are normal covalent bond, 6 is a coordinate bond. How we can justify that in some other way? See, if all the bonds were covalent, how many valence electrons are phosphorus atom has? 5 valence electron, S2P3. If it is forming all normal covalent bond, how many electrons will be around the central phosphorus? All electron acquire a partner electron through bonding. So 5 into 2, 10. Number of valence electrons should become 10 only. But here in PCl6 minus, there are 12 electrons around the central phosphorus. This means one of the electron pair is not normally covalent but coordinated. That's why we say one bond is coordinated. Also, another justification. In complexes, when chloride form additional bond, what we say, coordinated complexes we say, isn't it? So whenever Cl minus get attached, it must be considered as a coordinate bond. So the more correct answer is covalent, coordinate and ionic bond. Okay, hope you understood that. We proceed to the next, not to the next, its explanation. In solid state, PCl5 exists as an ionic pair of PCl4 and PCl6 minus ion formed by the transfer of one chloride ion between the two molecules as shown below, that we have already seen. Okay. Here, PCl4 involves sp3 hybridization and it is having tetrahedral geometry. On the other hand, PCl6 minus ion is having sp3d2 hybridization and so octahedral geometry. Here in PCl6 minus ion, only 5 bonds are covalent. One is coordinate since the 6th bond is with the Cl minus ion acting as a donor species. P atom has only 5 valence electrons in its atom, and by forming normal covalent bonds alone, the maximum number of electrons in the valence shell can be doubled to 10. But here there are 12 electrons in the valence shell of phosphorus atom and suggesting one of the bond to be coordinate bond. Hope you understood that. Okay. Just a minute until that stops ringing. We proceed to the next question. Which among the following is wrong? Orthosilicate contains the silicate unit SiO4 4 minus. Silicons have the general, not silicon, silicon, E is there. Silicons have the general formula R2SiO n times. CO2 plus C red hot 2CO is an endothermic product. SiO2 plus 2C furnace Si plus 2O. We will check one by one. See the first statement. Look here, orthosilicate. If you remember, orthosilicates are isolated silicate unit with the Si bonded to 4 oxygen atom tetrahedrally, each oxygen atom having one negative charge. Tetrahedral silicate unit. When it acquires cations having 4 positive charge, that gives you orthosilicate. Isolated silicates are found in orthosilicate. So I am given the answer here. Orthosilicate contains isolated silicate unit SiO4 4 minus as in calcium silicate Ca twice SiO4 or zirconium silicate Zr SiO4. In calcium silicate, 2 calcium together holds 4 positive charge. In Zr SiO4, zirconium alone holds 4 positive charge. Second statement, silicons are polymerized alkyl substituted silicates. Correct. Because SiO4 unit, in that 2 O's are substituted by 2 alkyl group and for 2 remaining oxygens are involved in polymerization. Look here how a silicon is formed. It is an example how silicon is formed, isn't it? Okay, so that is a correct statement. The terminal H is not mentioned while we say the formula. Okay. Now, third statement, CO2 plus CO giving 2CO is an endothermic reaction. It is a fact that reaction is endothermic. If you remember, in blast furnace uh, of iron metallurgy, there is a zone where the temperature drops. That zone is having a drop in temperature due to this reaction. Carbon dioxide formed first due to the burning of coal goes high, and where it meets carbon coming down, we fill we put carbon from the top of the furnace into the blast furnace. When they meet, these two react, forming carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and due to this reaction there's a slight decrease in the drop in the temperature within a part of the furnace. Okay, now the last option, in the option it is given that SiO2 plus 2C giving 1400 Kelvin, silicon, it is not given. In the option it is given SiO2 plus 2C giving Si plus 2CO. It is wrong. You know why? At 1400 degrees Celsius alone, that reaction is happening, SiO2 plus 2C giving Si plus 2CO. But if you are using an electric furnace where temperature can go even up to 3000 degrees Celsius, some additional change will happen. First, silicon and carbon monoxide will be formed, but that silicon may combine with the remaining carbon, excess carbon, forming silicon carbide. So that in the electric furnace, the net reaction may change to SiO2 plus 3CO giving SiC plus 2CO. Okay, so in the electric furnace, the product is mainly carborundum or silicon carbide. That's why that option is considered to be wrong. Okay, actually they should have mentioned the temperature also. Then only we can say whether it will be silicon or silicon carbide. Anyhow, they have given this to be the answer. So our that option is wrong because the product in the electric furnace at a high temperature will not be silicon but silicon carbide. See, silicon carbide is as if in diamond alternate carbon atoms are replaced by silicon. So it is having structure similar to diamond. Okay, very hard material. It is used as an abrasive that used to, you know, scratch the surfaces. Silicon carbide is a hard material with a diamond-like structure. It is used as an abrasive material. Okay. Question number 9. See, in the reaction H3BO3 at 373 Kelvin, X plus H2O, then HbO2 433 Kelvin, Y plus H2O, H2B4O7, red hot giving Z plus H2O. Here X, Y and Z. Four set of options are given there. Okay, we will straight away enter into the answers. What really happens there we will see. Okay, look here. When you heat H3BO3 is called boric acid or orthoboric acid. When you heat that at 373 water boiling temperature, it is converted to HbO2, which is H3BO3, as I told you, is either orthoboric acid or boric acid. It is converted to HbO2. It is called a metaboric acid. HbO2 is called a metaboric acid by releasing water. If you further heat at 433 Kelvin, you are raising the temperature. Then it is further converted to H2B4O7, not H4B2O7, H2B4O7 plus H2O, and that is called tetra 4 boron, tetraboric acid or pyroboric acid. Through heating you got, so you also call it pyroboric acid. But even this pyroboric acid can be further dehydrated to boron trioxide at a red hot. So dehydration takes place in several stages. Okay, okay. Here H3BO3 is called boric acid or orthoboric acid. HbO2 is called metaboric acid. H2B4O7 is called tetraboric acid or pyroboric acid. B2O3 is called boron trioxide. Further, see, if you take B2O3, the last product, you can say it is the anhydrous form of anhydride of H2B4O7, HbO2 as well as H3BO3 because it is the final product. On the other hand, if you are talking about H2B4O7, you can say it is the anhydride of H3BO3 as well as HbO2. And if you are talking about HbO2, you can say it is anhydride of H3BO3 alone. Okay. Okay. HbO2 is an anhydride of H3BO3. H2B4O7 is an anhydride of both H3BO3 and HbO2. B2O3 is an anhydride of all H3BO3, HbO2 and H4B2O7. Hope you understood that. And we go to the last question. Na2B4O7 plus 10H2O, full stop 10H2O, it is called a borax. You heat, you get X plus NaBO2. Okay. Then X plus Cr2O3 heat, you get Y, a green colored substance. Here X and Y are respectively. See, this is actually borax bead test. We have studied that. What is a borax bead test? You take a smooth copper wire, clean it, make a loop at the tip, wire loop at the tip, and show it in the clean blue Bunsen flame. It will show different colors due to various changes happening there, and it ceases to show any more color at a particular instance. Then you take it and take some borax powder, borax crystals in that loop. It will stay there, it won't fall. Big borax crystals are taken on that. Okay, then you again show it in the flame. This sodium borax will melt and fuse. Okay, then that reaction we will show in the next page. It will be forming both the NaBO2, sodium metaborate, and B2O3. And thereafter, you dip the same thing in oxide of some other metal like chromium, iron, cobalt, nickel, etc. And again take it and again show it in the flame. The oxide of this metal along with the thing remaining there fuse together, forming a colored bead there. That color will tell you which metal's oxide was the second compound. And that is called borax bead test. See, for example, I will explain it more. Look here, answer 3. This is an example of a borax bead test. Na2B4O7 10H2O heat, giving you a mixture of boron trioxide, sodium metaborate plus 10H2O. Okay. When you dip it in the oxide of chromium, it will stick onto that. Then you again show it in the flame so that they melt together. They melt together to form a new compound, a colored semi-transparent thing. Here it is CrBO2 thrice. Chromium metaborate. BO2 comes in metaborates. So it is called chromium metaborate. It is green colored. Okay, chromium metaborate. Actually, in borax bead test, the color depends upon mainly two things. One is the metal, which metal's oxide you are testing. The other is on which part of the flame you are showing this. You can show it either in the oxidizing part of the flame or on the reducing part of the flame. So for the same metal, you will get two different colors in many cases. But we don't have to enter into such details. So we stop there. So we have discussed all the 10 questions. Please go through all of them. Any doubt you can ask in the next class. So please take care. Bye.